podcast. I'm so excited to have Jeanine talking to me today. It's so good to have you.
It's so good to see you again. I know we had you on my podcast, so it's an honor to be on yours.
I love it. I love that we get to take turns. And this time we are turning the tables and just getting a chance to dive a little bit deeper into your life and story, your mental and emotional health. We're kind of pulling back the curtain. And I think this is really important because you know as well as I that sometimes Instagram can feel like this perfect little bubble. And it feels like nobody has problems. Everyone's posting their picture perfect lives, but that's not reality, and we all know it.
Right.
And there's things going on behind the scenes for everybody. And this is why I think it's so important for each of us to have a chance to kind of pull back the curtain on life. So, okay, starting with, I said Instagram, so that's going to make me go right into that. But that's where I first was introduced to you.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about your Instagram journey and who you are and how you even got started. And then just for those who don't have any context for who you are, tell us a little bit about you.
Amazing. Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Deborah. I'm really excited to be here. And I just love supporting your work as well. But yeah, my name is Jeanine Amapola, now Ward. I've been married for 4 months, which has been so freaking fun. And I went through quite a journey of heartbreak after heartbreak. So we'll talk about that later, but that was a big part of my story. And born and raised in Dallas, I've been doing social media since I was 17 years old. I'm actually turning 30 this week, which is so crazy.
Wow. Like you
I
were
know.
on social media before anybody else was on social
Yeah.
media.
Yeah, YouTube was 3 years old and I started in 2010. YouTube started 2007. That's where I started. And I just migrated to every single platform as, social media evolved. And I originally started making content around cheerleading and beauty and life hacks and really what I was just doing at that time in my life when I was younger. Then I migrated to college videos and then I migrated to more health and fitness. And then the Lord completely grabbed a hold of my heart around 2019, and my content completely shifted around this time. And then I started making my content more faith based, starting pretty much right around 2019, beginning of 2020.
Wow.
And we'll talk about this, but around that time is when I hit a very pivotal moment in my career. And so now I mainly do faith related content. My heart is really for young adult women. And I've been on this for a very long time. And so, yes, I totally know what it's like to have a perfect picture life. And then behind the scenes, you're absolutely in shambles, which is just, it's relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of 7 kids. My parents are from 2 different countries. So my dad is from Germany. My mom is from Guatemala. So I'm a first gen American. And it's been quite a journey with that as well. And also, social media was not a thing for my parents. They did not understand it, did not support it. They were like, what are you doing out of all the jobs you could have picked? This is the one you picked. Like in their mind, they wanted me to either be in ministry or my mom wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer.
Right.
So this job was not what she envisioned for me, but now they fully support me and they really believe in it.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's look behind some of the Instagram posts. And by the way, I love your Instagram. I love your heart of faith. It's clear that Jesus is so important to you, and it just kind of comes out of everything that you do, and I really appreciate that. But tell us behind the scenes, when have you walked through a season where from the outside looking in, it looked like things were okay, but really things weren't okay?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm like, which one? I could
Yeah.
go, I could go through so many of these. I would say the number one moment that actually comes to my mind is when I was talking about that transitional period of my faith. I was going through a very traumatic kind of breakup. This person I was dating really ripped me apart. My virginity, his family ripped me apart, for my social media and just for even my skin color. And so there was multiple things in that made me really question my identity. And so online, I was trying to start posting about Jesus. I had brand deals to do, but on the behind the scenes, I was really trying to refigure out who am I? Why am I doing this job? I wasn't fully quite yet posting about Jesus, so it didn't feel quite fulfilling for me. And then on top of that, I had these outsiders picking me apart, telling me I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't posting Jesus enough, and then that this guy told me he was really frustrated that he wasn't going to marry a virgin, and that he was frustrated that he wasn't going to get to marry that. And so there was like multiple things on top of that, and I feel like I had to prove who I was, prove my worth and my value to this person and to this family. Meanwhile, no one knew behind the scenes that I was absolutely heartbroken that this person and I were going through a breakup, and it was a public relationship. And so my followers would constantly, DM me and text me like, did you and so break up? What's going on? And so it was really difficult. And I literally, it sounds super dramatic, but I genuinely feel like it was like a quarter life crisis where I questioned everything. I questioned myself, my family, my platform, God. And I really think the Lord spoke in it. But, at the time it was like an utmost low moment for me.
Yeah. So would you say that the main theme of that season was trying to find value, trying to learn how to rest under criticism and misunderstanding? Um, what would you say was like the main theme?
I feel like my whole life I've seen a thread of people pleasing because of a lack of identity I had growing up. And that still was a thread I had all throughout college. I talk a lot about this in my book and the way that manifested for me. And so I feel like for me, it was always people pleasing to try to get people to approve of me because at the time I didn't like me. And so if someone didn't like me, it just reconfirmed, oh, that's why people don't like me. I'm weird, or I'm this Christian girl, or my background, or my skin color, whatever. So I feel like people pleasing has always been a threat in my life. And I think that's mainly what I probably boil it down to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So essentially, you're looking at your value through the lens of what they think of you, how they see you is how you see yourself. So if they
Yeah.
like you, that's really good and helpful. But then the second people start to question or don't like you don't have that firm identity. So it starts to shift and you start to question yourself. Tell me a little bit about growing up. Like when do you feel like you started becoming and functioning out of the role of people pleaser?
Hmm. I feel like this is something I still continually am working through. Honestly, I feel like everyone unfortunately has this trait because we want to be liked. And so I think I more overcame it in the last 3, 4 years. I would definitely say at least when I moved back to Dallas around 2021, when I changed the people around me. Now my now husband and my best friend Maddie really spoke into this, and I had many other people in my life that were for me, calling me out on this. And I would say it was around that quarter life crisis when I wondered, why did this family ripping me apart bother me so much? And why did it bother me so much when I saw a hate comment about me? I just always would wonder, like, why does that affect me so much? Even if it wasn't true, I would see it and it would just absolutely wreck my day. And so I would say around the last 3 years is when I've really become more victorious over it. Now, it's not to say that it doesn't still bother me every now and then, but I feel like because of my upbringing, because my parents are from different countries, and I, didn't look like a lot of my peers. I was in very predominantly white churches and schools and a neighborhood. And my family, we were the only, brown hair, brown skin, whatever, brown eyes. And we got made fun of it a ton. Like people called us some very derogatory names and told us, go back to Mexico. Why did you cross the border? Things like that, that were just so horrible for anyone to ever hear. And so I think that thread of hearing, you don't belong here, this isn't your country, or your dad's a Nazi, whatever, that type of stuff just stuck with me, where I did not want to associate to my culture because it was deemed as bad with my peers. And so I wanted to get rid of that as much as possible so that I could do whatever I could to fit in, to be American, to be liked. And I think that was just this common thread throughout all of middle school and pretty much to college, until God really took a hold of me and was like, no, like I made you this way for a reason, and I want you to accept that and choose that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to imagine you as a young girl because, you're adorable and you're
Thank
you're
you.
you're so cute. You have the cutest clothes and outfits and you can just tell that you're beautiful inside and out, but I want people to understand that that's not who you felt like you were when you were a little girl. If
Yeah.
I had to ask you to pinpoint, like sometimes I say we all have a little child inside of us that if we're not careful, we can start functioning out of that childhood place. And it's usually our most unhealed place in childhood. Maybe it's that season where someone got abused, or maybe it's that stage of life where someone's parents got divorced and they felt alone and vulnerable. Maybe it's that stage where a breakup happened and they felt unwanted. We all have that little child living inside of us, and if we're not careful, it comes out and we start to function out of that place. So if I asked you to pinpoint who is the little girl living inside of you, around what age and stage comes to your mind?
I would say middle school is when it most was aware to me because that's when I went from being homeschooled to going to a smaller school. And I wasn't really aware that I wasn't normal or that I didn't look like everybody or I didn't have a certain amount of money like a lot of people. And so middle school is when I was more exposed to this and more exposed to people making comments. And then that's, I think, when all the insecurities began. I don't think I was very insecure before that. I mean, I was definitely aware when I went to church, like, okay, no one talks to me and my sisters. We don't really fit in here. But middle school is when I would actually outright hear those comments, or I would feel the rejection, or I would feel, okay, wow, I'm really not as accepted as other people. And so, yeah, I think the more I was exposed to that and different certain types of people, then that's when I became fully aware of that, of like, oh, I want to fit in, I want to be liked, and I was willing to do whatever it took to get there.
Yeah. So it's that little middle school girl that comes out that's like, oh, you don't fit in, you don't belong. Do people even like you? And those are kind of the underlying thoughts that you have. If you could put some of those thoughts into words now, maybe you weren't able to put them into words then, but what are some of those negative strains of thinking that maybe would have crossed your mind as a middle schooler?
Um, Man, I like I haven't talked to that middle schooler in so long. It's so funny. I feel like what she was thinking is, no one likes you because of the way you look, or no one likes you because of your family, or you're not smart enough to be at this school, or you're not the athletic girl. No wonder why they don't like you. You're the artsy girl. Of course they want the sporty volleyball girl. Um, I just feel like I constantly compared myself to every other person next to me and just was like, man, I'm never going to be that. I'm never going to be that. I didn't know what my contribution was. And so I just let those lies constantly ruminate in my brain. And so it was always comparison, I would say. You're
Yeah,
not like her. You don't look like her. You don't have money like her. You don't have boobs like her. You don't have the body like her. You don't have the grades like her. She has these parties at her house and you don't have parties at your house. And it sounds kind of cliche because it is very middle schooler and high schoolery, but those did bleed into, I would say, my later young adult years as well.
for sure. For sure. And the reason I ask is because I feel like there are so many women right now, young women in their 20s and 30s, who are still functioning out of that place of middle school girl.
Yeah.
Like what is coming out of them is all rooted in that place. So let me ask you this. As a parent, I have a middle school girl right now. And we grew up similar to you. There's different generations. I'm first generation American, so there's cultural differences.
Yeah.
There's belief system differences. How did your parents help to affirm that little girl? Or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe they didn't affirm it. Maybe they didn't even know what was going on. I'm just kind of curious as a parent how you process Did they speak into that? Did they not even know it was going on? Was it not on the radar? Like, you kind of talk me through what that looked like with your parents.
Yeah. I don't think my parents fully knew what was going on. I think that is also one of the problems. And my dad and I actually, my dad read my entire book, which was so
Yeah.
sweet. And once he saw how much I went through, my dad was like, "What could I have done better? Like, I'm
Oh,
so sorry that I wasn't there for you." And I kind of just told him, I said, to be honest, I didn't feel a super safe space to come to both of you and share with you. And I shared some stuff with my mom, and my parents always validated, like I would tell them the comments that some kids would say, and they constantly, affirmed me scripturally and biblically and prayed over me. And they always told me to be confident in who I was and that how God made me. And they reminded me always of that. But the problem was, I kept so many things in the darkness. Like no one really knew what I was struggling through. I think only my sisters really understood because we all felt this similar thing, this similar common thread between all of us, and people that were, even my sisters that were 10 years older than me, they were getting the same criticism from people. And so I think we all bonded over that, but we didn't know how to fix it. And then, like, none of us really, for some odd reason, felt like we could tell our parents anything. So I think a lot of this was just carrying these burdens on our own and trying our best to fix it and solve it on as much as we could on our own. And man, I wish that little girl knew, like, that's not your burden to carry. That's God's burden, and your parents are there to help you. But I don't think, because again, they're all what you were saying, the cultural differences.
yeah,
And I would look around and I would be like, man, like my friends can tell their parents anything. Like, why can't I have that? It was never that my parents intentionally were like, nope, don't tell me. Like, I just don't think it was set. And I didn't see my parents constantly tell each other everything either. And so
right.
I didn't know, like, oh, we can talk about this stuff. And so I don't blame my parents at all, but I don't think that that was something my parents outwardly expressed. Like, hey, you can tell me anything. And I wish they did, because that probably would have solved a lot of things and helped me in a lot of ways.
Well, this is why this is so important because it shows that we have to be intentional. And I think you're right. Our parents did what they could with what they had, but that doesn't mean it didn't affect us. We need to look
Yeah.
back, not to blame, but so that we can do things differently for the next generation.
Right.
I talk about how there's 4 levels of conversation. The first level is the basic level, it's the facts. How are you doing? What are you up to? What's your schedule like? Basic facts. You can have facts conversations with a stranger. The next level is opinions and ideas, and it requires a little bit more of you. Here's what I think. Here's what I believe. Here's my opinion about my favorite this or that, my favorite team, my opinion about this, politics, or whatever. It's a little bit more of you. And then the third level is feelings. Like, this is what I'm feeling. I am
Yeah.
frustrated. I'm hurt. I'm embarrassed. I'm scared. I'm stressed. I'm insecure. I feel unaccepted, unloved. And the fourth level is faith. Like, what is God teaching you personally? What does your walk with the Lord look like now? What are you struggling with? What are your sins? What are you? So, if you think about it, I would say the average family is comfortable with level 1 and maybe level 2.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
the average family doesn't really engage in level 3, and they don't know how to. It's not part of the family makeup, the culture of the family. So you end up having to navigate these deeper levels kind of on your own.
It's so true. That's so funny you said that, because I dated someone later in my life and I met his family, and his family went to the level 4
Okay.
almost every single time. And I was flabbergasted. I'm like, you just confess your sin to your mom and your mom knows everything that you did last night? Like, it was so mind-boggling to me that the kids told their parents everything. And then they would just openly talk about everything. And I was like, this is so crazy to me. But then I also realized that that's why the kids were so healthy. Some of the healthiest kids I've ever seen, that feared God, loved God, were on mission for him, like very emotionally, spiritually healthy. And I was like, wow, there's really something here that I took note of, that God showed me through this family, that the open communication with the kids and the parents like really bless them and set them free. And I was like, I want that going forward for
Mm,
my future kids.
yes. Okay. So So you're middle school, you're struggling, you don't feel like you have a template to figure out how do I talk about this stuff. So you
Yeah.
don't. You all just kind of struggle through it. You're trying to find your value, and then you meet somebody who ends up not being a really good fit for you. But it sounds like because of the voids that you were feeling, you're like, I'm going to make this work.
Yes.
So tell me about that.
Yeah. I think a lot of times the reason why we stay in those unhealthy relationships is because we don't believe that we deserve more.
Right.
And I didn't believe that. I didn't know that there was a better man out there that was going to treat me better. And I mean, I look back now and that was not a good relationship. I think the first 3 months were, and then the remaining were not. And
And
I
let
kind
me
of
let me
just,
interrupt you and say this. When you're
sure.
used to getting crumbs from the people around you, from your peers, getting a little bit more than crumbs feels awesome. But
Mhm.
then when you pull back and you're like, wait, I'm still getting crumbs. Like this is not a whole meal. This is still lacking. But for you, it feels so much better than what you were previously getting. So it
Yeah.
doesn't set in right away that this isn't healthy, right? Because it's like, this is a little better. And then you start seeing the red flags.
Yes, that's exactly how I describe it is I would have rather had the crumbs than had nothing at all because
Yeah.
then I wouldn't have been lonely. And I thought in my ideal version of myself, oh, this is my dream guy and he's everything on the checklist. And meanwhile, my heart was so void of everything. He never really met those deep parts of me that needed to be healed. Instead, he actually poked at them
Yeah.
and made them worse and called them out. And further made me feel guilty of past decisions that I had made. But I just was no, like in my mind, I was like, no, like I thought this was a good guy. And like he does ministry. So this is kind of confusing. And so I couldn't fully wrap my mind around it psychologically, probably like you can, of like, why am I here? Why am I staying? And I just was so married to the idea of him and what we could be that I
Yeah.
could not let go. I could not let go until finally the Lord was just like, you have got to lay this down. And when I did, I'm so glad I did because I finally started to find that freedom and healing that I was looking for. But it took me finally having so many people in my life being like, Jeanine, you deserve better. Like, this is not what a godly man does. And I was like, wow, you're right. And so it took some time for me to finally believe that. I would hear it all the time, but I didn't actually believe it yet.
Yeah. How long did it take you to get to that point?
My gosh, I'd say over a year. We broke
Mhm.
up and still a year went by where it was constantly him checking in and then bouncing and then texting me again and then bouncing. And so for that whole year, I was trying to heal. And then finally around the year mark is when when I cut off all communication, I just was like, it's time for me to heal. And I went through therapy for a year, like a year and a half. And so that whole year I started to heal and understand why I was doing what I was doing. And so I'm such a advocate for counseling because finally eventually after a year the relationship ended, I understood and I was like, wow, I deserve so much better. And I finally got that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. One thing that you said, first of all, let's just make it clear that Christians can have red flags, you
Tell
know?
me about it.
And I think we sometimes try to over spiritualize the red flags because they're Christians. It's like,
Right.
well, maybe it's not a boundary issue. Maybe he's just trying to show the love of Christ, or
Yep.
maybe it's not this, maybe it's just that. But Christians have red flags, and red always means stop. There is no case in which red does not mean stop. The relationship needs to stop because you cannot change the red flags. But I think what you said is so important. Too many people are more committed to the idea of marriage than they are to the person that they're marrying.
Right.
It's like this concept of marriage that we put on a pedestal. And it's like, okay, this is it. This is what I've been living for. When really, that's not what the Bible teaches. You're not living for marriage. Marriage could be a result of God's calling on your life, but you're not living for marriage. But like you said, when you're married to the idea of marriage, it can be really hard to let go. You feel like you're going to be alone. You're back to square one. So how you said part of that journey for you was pulling back, taking that year to really heal, even though in hindsight, it probably wasn't the best because you were still like, there were still contact points, but you were
Yeah.
pulling back. You were trying to heal on your own, getting healthier and healthier throughout the year, getting counseling. And then you finally decided, okay, this is it. I'm done. And it sounds like you were surrounded with good, healthy friends.
Yes.
How did that
Thankfully.
make a difference for you?
Oh my gosh, it made all the difference because I realized one of my weaknesses is that I'm actually very prone and susceptible to peer pressure and to not make wise decisions in isolation. And I know that about myself. That's a big part of my story. It's something I talk about in my book. And so having people around me to make wise decisions, and that would literally be like, Jeanine, this is not good for you, or like, why don't you finally block him, or it's time for you guys to finally stop interacting on social media, or people being like, you deserve more than this is not how you should be treated. Having those people constantly tell me that really helped me make wiser decisions, because on my own it was really hard for me to get emotionally unattached, because I can be more of an emotional person. And so I didn't know how to emotionally unattach from him. And I definitely think there were some sort of ties there. And even though we didn't do anything physically, I still was like, there was some sort of tie there. And so having those people around me to sharpen me, refine me, and call me out and challenge me was so, so important. I mean, my counselor was like my mentor as well. And she literally told me, like, Jeanine, like, you're never going to get a good man. You're never going to marry the right man if you keep lingering and letting this other man drag you along. And I was like, oh, that's so hard to hear, but you're right. And so I think for anybody, having people along the process is so staple, so key. I mean, really, you just cannot do this life on your own. It's so much harder on your own.
Yeah. What difference do you think it would have made if you took that year of counseling, that year and a half, and put that into practice before you started dating?
I think I would have been able to see those red flags early on. And I wish I had educated myself a little bit more on what kind of the love bombing type of stuff was like. Because after that year, I did so much research on, value as a woman and feminine energy and what do I deserve as a godly woman. Like, I did all the research on the back end. And I think if I had done that on the front end, and I didn't know I needed to do that. So I think God's timing
Right.
was perfect, but I would have known and been able to see all the signs and then been like, okay, nope, nope, nope. I've seen this written before. I've seen this happen to other people. Not for me. Thank you. God bless you. Bye.
Right.
I had no education on it. I didn't even know what narcissism was, or red flags, or really the love bombing, or anything like that. I just was so kind of naive and in love that I was just like, wait, no, but this feels good. And so probably would have prevented me from a lot of heartbreak, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Our relationships are as healthy as we are standing alone. And
Mm,
even when we see an unhealthy relationship dynamic, it's like, this is a reflection of my health because I'm still engaging, right? I'm
so
still
true.
contributing. I am attracting, I'm a magnet here in this equation. And so when I begin to change and heal and grow, it even changes the type of people that I find myself attracted to. Like you said, you recognize the red flag so much faster when your radar is on point
Yeah.
versus when it's distracted and sick and tired and weak. So I think it's so important for people to know that the journey of healthy relationships starts by becoming healthy standing alone, and that investment in your single years will never be in vain. Sometimes when I'm working with singles and counseling, I'm like, listen, you are saving yourself money on marriage counseling right now
Literally.
because you're doing the work in advance. Okay, I just have to know how the story ends. So fast forward to you're married now.
Yes. So, I mean, that was quite a gap in there. We broke up 2019 and I got married at the end of 2023. So there was a big gap in there. There was actually one more relationship in between there that did not work out and also kind of left me a little bit heartbroken, but not even heartbroken, just more grieving like, oh, I'm 28, thought I'd be getting married at this point in my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is I could see a stark contrast between the 2019 breakup and the 2022 breakup of how I
Yeah.
handled that. And
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. My singleness was never wasted because I worked so much on myself. And God really helped me heal a lot faster. The pain was not nearly as bad. I was confident in myself still. I knew I trusted the Lord that God would bring me the right person. And so, yeah, 2022, I met my now husband, I and it was still kind of scary for me because I was like, whoa, I'm used to men being either avoidant or kind of, dipping in or dipping out or kind of leaving me wondering. And my now husband, Caleb, never did that. He just pursued me relentlessly, like fearlessly, and just loved me for me. He never tried to change me, never tried to be like, yeah, I wish you would dye your hair. I wish you looked like this, or I wish he just loved me for me. And so, it was definitely different because I think when you become so accustomed to a certain type of dating or a certain type of man, the unexpected unfamiliar, you're like, wait, whoa, I don't want this. Not that I didn't want it, but I just wasn't familiar to me. And it's like you can run back to that familiarity.
Yeah.
And I almost did that. And I think the Lord was like, nope, we're not doing that. I'm protecting you one more time. And I'm so glad I married my husband because he truly was what I needed. And God knew that all along. And so now we've been married 4 months and it's been amazing.
I love that. It is so easy for us to default to what's familiar over what's healthy
Right.
because it feels comfortable. So what a journey that you've been on. And let me just tell you, when that little middle school girl comes up, and she will every now and again, you know exactly what she needs to hear,
Yeah.
and with compassion and truth, you can look her in the eye and remind her of who she is and where she's going, and in a way, put her in her place.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm like, quit it. No, don't do it right now.
that is not who I am anymore. And
Right.
and and so I'm so proud of you and the journey that you've been on. And I know that you just are finished writing a book. I think it's already out, right?
It comes out March 26th next
March
week. So
26th. We're
next
so
Tuesday.
close.
I
Tell us a little bit
know.
about it.
Yeah, so really you get to hear this story more in depth. This really is a book for it mainly is for young adults because that's really my heart. And it is
Yeah.
the book that I wrote when I was younger, when I needed a guide in my life to figure out friendships and dating and career and how do I make decisions? How do I read the word of God? How do I take care of my body from the inside and out? I wrote the book that I needed. And so it's called Becoming Happy and Healthy, Real Life Advice on Friendship, Dating, Career, and everything else you care about. And I really wrote every single chapter with you in mind or with the listener in mind of what is practical, biblical, authentic advice that someone needs to hear to better their lives. And so you'll hear more of my story in depth there and more things that I don't even share on this podcast, how I overcame them and how you can overcome them as well. And so I really pray it blesses somebody.
Yeah, and I know it will. Your healing journey is not wasted and it's never in vain. So thank you for sharing it with us, and may God continue revealing layers, next
Yeah.
layer of what he wants to heal in your life as he's making you more like him each step of the way. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for having me. That was so fun. I really enjoyed that.